The fog clung to Blackthorn Manor like a mourner's veil. In the library, Sir Reginald Blackthorn lay slumped across his mahogany desk, a silver letter opener buried in his throat. No blood pooled, only a single black feather curled as if singed. The fire had died hours ago, yet the room smelled of brimstone. Outside, the hounds refused to bark. Hercule Poirot, summoned by a telegram that arrived after the murder, stepped from the mist. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, twirling his mustache. "The devil, he has left his calling card." Chapter 1. The Silent Scream. The fog that night was not merely weather. It was a living entity coiling around Blackthorn Manor like the serpentine breath of some ancient slumber-bound dragon. It pressed against the mullioned windows with insistent fingers, blurring the demarcation between the outer world and the shadowed corridors within. The manor itself, a brooding edifice of weathered granite and Gothic spires, stood upon the desolate moor as though it had been exhumed from the earth rather than constructed by human hands. Its chimneys exhaled no smoke, for the fires had been allowed to gutter and die hours earlier. And the silence that enveloped the place was so profound that even the perpetual whisper of the wind seemed muted, as if the very atmosphere held its breath in anticipation of revelation. It was precisely 3 o'clock in the morning when the grandfather clock in the entrance hall tolled its somber knell. 3 measured strikes that reverberated through the hollow veins of the house like the heartbeat of a dying titan. The sound lingered, then dissolved into the fog, leaving behind an emptiness that felt almost accusatory. In the library, where the air was thick with the mingled scents of aged leather, beeswax polish, and the faint, acrid tang of extinguished candles, Sir Reginald Blackthorn lay slumped across his mahogany desk. His head rested upon a scatter of parchment and vellum, his right hand still clutching a silver letter opener that protruded from his throat at an angle both precise and grotesque. The blade had entered just beneath the jaw, severing the carotid with surgical efficiency. Yet curiously, there was no sanguine pool upon the blotter, no crimson rivulets tracing the grain of the wood. Only a single black feather curled at its tip as though singed by an invisible flame, lay beside the corpse like a macabre signature. The room itself was a testament to the victim's obsessions. Shelves of morocco-bound tomes rose to the vaulted ceiling, their spines emblazoned with arcane symbols and titles in languages long forgotten by all but the most recondite scholars. A taxidermy raven perched upon a pedestal in the corner, its glass eyes reflecting the dim glow of a single gas lamp that had been left burning. Whether by oversight or design, none could say. The fire in the grate had collapsed into a bed of ash, yet an inexplicable odor permeated the space. The sharp, hellish reek of brimstone, as though the devil himself had paused to warm his hands before departing. Outside, the hounds in the kennels, usually vociferous at the slightest provocation, refused to utter a sound, cowering in their straw with tails tucked and ears flattened. It was into this tableau of calculated horror that Hercule Poirot arrived, stepping from the mist-shrouded drive as though materializing from the ether itself. The telegram that had summoned him, a terse missive bearing only the words, "Murder at Blackthorn, come at once." J had reached his London flat at precisely the moment when most respectable citizens were contemplating breakfast rather than violent death. Yet Poirot, ever attuned to the capricious whims of fate, had wasted no time. His valet George had packed a small valise with the efficiency of long practice, and the little detective had boarded the earliest train northward, his mind already arranging the disparate threads of information into patterns only his formidable intellect could discern. The front door opened before he could raise the knocker, revealing Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, his face drawn and pale beneath the brim of his bowler hat. "Poirot," the inspector greeted, his voice a mixture of relief and exasperation. "Thank God you've come. This one's got the local constabulary and knots, and the family, well, they're a rum lot and no mistake. Poirot removed his gloves with deliberate care, his small, neat hands moving with the precision of a watchmaker. My friend, you intrigue me. A locked room, perhaps? Windows barred from within? The classic conundrum? His eyes, bright as a bird's beneath the perfectly waxed mustache, scanned the entrance hall with rapid calculation. Worse than that, Jap muttered, leading the way toward the library. Locked from the inside, windows barred, no footprints in the dew outside. The butler found him at 6 this morning, Sir Reginald, that is. Been dead since midnight, the doctor says. But here's the kicker. No one heard a thing. Not a scream, not a struggle, just silence. They entered the library, and Poirot paused upon the threshold, absorbing the scene with the intensity of a connoisseur examining a rare painting. The body remained undisturbed, the local police having the good sense to await Scotland Yard's involvement. Sir Reginald Blackthorne had been a man of imposing presence in life, tall, broad-shouldered, with a mane of iron-gray hair and features carved as though from the same granite as his ancestral home. In death, however, he appeared diminished, his skin waxy and translucent, his eyes staring sightlessly at some point beyond the veil. The expression frozen upon his countenance was not one of pain, but of profound terror, as though he had beheld something in his final moments that transcended mere mortal comprehension. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, approaching the desk with the caution of a cat stalking prey. Observe the precision of the wound. The letter opener, silver, engraved with the initials R.B., has been driven with considerable force. Yet the angle suggests the assailant was of similar height to the victim. Curious. He produced a pair of tweezers from his pocket and delicately lifted the black feather, holding it to the gaslight. Raven. But see here, the tip is singed not by ordinary fire but by acid. Sulfuric, perhaps. And the smell. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring. Brimstone, the devil's perfume. Jap shifted uncomfortably. The family claims Sir Reginald was dabbling in, well, the occult. Collected all-round strange books, artifacts from his travels. Said the house was cursed, that ravens brought messages from the other side. Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. Superstition, my dear Jap, is the refuge of those who fear the rationale. Yet one must consider all possibilities, even those that strain credulity. He turned his attention to the desk, noting the scattered papers, correspondence mostly, bearing the crests of various antiquarian societies. One letter, however, caught his eye. A single sheet of heavy vellum, its edges charred as though held too close to flame. The inscription was in a spidery hand. Traitor. Before Poirot could examine it further, a rustle of silk announced the arrival of Lady Arabella Blackthorne. She descended the grand staircase with the ethereal grace of a spectre, her dressing gown of midnight blue velvet trailing behind her like liquid shadow. Her beauty was of the fragile porcelain variety, pale skin, raven hair coiled in loose waves, eyes the color of storm-tossed seas. Yet there was a hardness beneath the delicacy, a steel that spoke of endurance in the face of adversity. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice cultured and precise, though laced with an undercurrent of strain. Inspector Jap informed us of your impending arrival. I am relieved that someone of your reputation has been summoned. Poirot bowed with courtly elegance. Madame, enchanté, though the circumstances are most regrettable. You discovered your husband thus. Lady Arabella's fingers tightened upon the banister. No. I was reading in my boudoir when the clock struck 3. I heard nothing, no cry, no disturbance. It was only when Mrs. Danvers raised the alarm at dawn that... Her voice caught and she pressed a lace handkerchief to her lips. He was alive when I retired at 11. We had quarreled. about his obsession with those dreadful books, but nothing more. Quarreled? Poirot's eyebrow arched. About occult matters, perhaps, or something more personal? Her gaze flicked to Jap, then back to Poirot. Reginald believed the manor was haunted by some ancestral curse. He claimed to see ravens at his window, to hear whispers in the walls. I told him it was nonsense, that he should see a physician, but he refused. She hesitated, then added softly, "There were rumors about myself and Captain Blackthorne, his nephew. Utter fabrications, but Reginald believed them." Poirot filed this information away with the meticulous care of a librarian cataloging rare volumes. "And where, madam, were the other members of the household during these critical hours?" Miles, Captain Blackthorne, was in London, or so he claims. He arrived unexpectedly yesterday evening demanding reconciliation. Reginald refused to see him. Dr. Hawthorne, our physician, departed after dinner. She had been treating Reginald for sleepwalking. Mrs. Danvers retired to her quarters in the East Wing at 10. Sleepwalking? Poirot's interest sharpened. A curious affliction for a man of Sir Reginald's vigor. Lady Arabella's expression grew guarded. He would wander the moors at night, returning at dawn with no memory of his excursions. Dr. Hawthorne prescribed laudanum, but it seemed only to worsen the episodes. As if summoned by the mention of her name, Mrs. Danvers appeared in the doorway. A gaunt woman of indeterminate age, dressed in severe black bombazine, her iron-gray hair pulled back in a bun so tight it seemed to stretch the skin of her face. She had served the Blackthorne family for 4 decades, and her devotion to her late master bordered upon the fanatical. Sir Reginald was reading, she stated flatly, as though reciting from memory. In this very room. I brought him his nightly brandy at 11:30. He dismissed me curtly, said he had important work to complete. Poirot turned to her with his most disarming smile. And you, madam, heard nothing after that? No visitors? No disturbances? Mrs. Danvers' eyes, pale and piercing, met his without flinching. This house keeps its secrets, monsieur. The walls are thick, the doors heavier still. But I sleep lightly, and I heard nothing. Not until the raven... The raven? Poirot pounced upon the word. She hesitated, then continued. At midnight I thought I heard wings against my window, a great black bird larger than any natural creature. But when I looked, there was only the fog. Jap snorted. Superstitious nonsense, probably just the wind. But Poirot was not so quick to dismiss. He returned to the desk, his magnifying glass now in hand, examining the letter opener with intense concentration. The handle was warm to the touch, curious given the room's chill, and the blade bore faint traces of a sticky residue. Laudanum, perhaps, or something more sinister? Observe, he said to Jap, indicating the corpse's right hand. The fingers are clenched as though grasping something in his final moments. Yet there is nothing there now. And the eyes. He gently lifted one eyelid, revealing the pupil dilated to an unnatural degree. Terror, yes, but also recognition. He knew his killer. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, and the gas lamp flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced like malevolent spirits across the walls. From the grate, where the ashes lay cold and gray, a scrap of paper fluttered upward, as though caught in an updraft that should not exist. It was the same charred vellum Poirot had noted earlier, but now the single word inscribed upon it seemed to pulse with malevolent intent. Traitor. Poirot caught the paper mid-air, his movements swift despite his diminutive stature. This was not here when we entered, he said quietly. Someone or something wishes us to see it. Jap paled. You don't think... I think, my friend, that the game has begun, and the players are already in motion. Poirot's eyes gleamed with the thrill of the chase. Come, we must examine the grounds before the fog lifts entirely, and someone must fetch Captain Blackthorne from whatever tavern he currently frequents. The heir apparent, I think, has much to explain. As they moved toward the door, a sound echoed through the manor, not the wind, not the creaking of old timbers, but something else. A whisper, faint as the brush of raven wings against glass. The third step creaks. Poirot froze, his hand upon the doorknob. The grandfather clock in the hall struck the quarter hour, its chimes reverberating like a death knell. And somewhere in the upper regions of the house, a door closed with the finality of a coffin lid. The investigation of Blackthorn Manor had only just begun, and already the shadows lengthened with secrets too terrible to contemplate. Chapter 2. The Heir Apparent. The billiard room lay at the rear of Blackthorn Manor, a cavernous space paneled in dark oak and lit by a single green-shaded lamp that cast a bilious glow over the baize table. The air was thick with the ghosts of cigars long extinguished, and the faint clack of ivory balls lingered in memory, though none had been struck for hours. Hercule Poirot entered with the measured tread of a man who knew the value of silence, Inspector Japp at his elbow like a faithful but impatient terrier. The room smelled of brandy and desperation. Captain Miles Blackthorne stood at the far end, cue in hand, though no game was in progress. He was a tall man, broad across the shoulders, with the sun-bleached hair and weathered complexion of one who had spent too many years under foreign skies. His uniform, khaki faded at the seams, hung upon him as though it had been tailored for a larger soul. A half-empty decanter glinted on the sideboard. The level had descended considerably since dawn. "You are late, Monsieur Poirot," Miles said without turning. His voice carried the clipped authority of the officer class, but beneath it ran a tremor of something rawer, rage perhaps, or fear. "I was told the great detective would arrive by luncheon. It is now past tea." Poirot inclined his head, the picture of courtesy. "The fog, Capitaine, it is most uncooperative. And murder, alas, does not keep to railway timetables." He crossed to the table, running a gloved finger along the cushion. "You play billiards alone? A melancholy occupation." Miles spun the cue between his fingers, a restless motion. "I play to think. Uncle Reginald taught me," said the angles sharpened the mind, though he hadn't touched a cue in years. Too busy communing with his damned ravens. Poirot's eyes flicked to the walls. Above the mantel hung a portrait of Sir Reginald in his prime. Stern, patrician, the eyes already holding that glint of fanaticism which had deepened with age. Beneath it, a glass-fronted cabinet stood ajar, empty. "Curious," Poirot murmured. "Your uncle collected curiosities, oui? Yet this cabinet, it is bare." Miles followed his gaze and gave a short, humorless laugh. He kept his choicest pieces there, a raven, stuffed naturally, Egyptian, or so he claimed. Said it had been mummified with the pharaohs. Worth a fortune, apparently. He set the cue across the table with a clatter. "Gone now, along with half his sanity." Japp cleared his throat. "Captain Blackthorne, you arrived yesterday evening unannounced. Sir Reginald refused to see you. Care to explain?" Miles poured another measure of brandy, the crystal trembling slightly in his grip. "Debts, Inspector. The usual soldier's curse. I'd heard Uncle was selling off the estate piece by piece to fund his occult nonsense. Came to beg, if you must know. He sent word by Mrs. Danvers. Tell the prodigal his inheritance is spoken for," then locked himself in the library with his books and his brandy. Poirot circled the room, noting details with the precision of a surveyor. A scuff on the parquet near the window. A single black feather caught in the tassel of the curtain. The faint odor of sulfur that seemed to cling to everything like a miasma. And after this rejection, Capitaine, where did you go? To the village inn, the Black Swan. Ask the barman. He'll tell you I drowned my sorrows until closing, then walked back through the fog. Found the house in uproar at dawn. His mouth twisted. Convenient, isn't it? The disgraced heir arriving the night his uncle is murdered. The police will love that. Poirot paused before the empty cabinet. The lock was intact, but a faint scratch marred the brass, new by the brightness of the metal. This raven, describe it, s'il vous plaît. Large, glossy, eyes of red glass, carnelian, Uncle said. Wings spread as if in flight. He kept it on a plinth of ebony with a brass plate. Corvus Corax, messenger of the gods. Miles drained his glass. He believed it watched him, said it spoke in his dreams. Jap snorted. More of this superstitious rot. The man was off his chump. Perhaps, Poirot said softly, or perhaps he saw truths others preferred to ignore. He produced the singed feather from his pocket, holding it to the lamplight. This matches your description, no? Yet the tip, burned not by fire but by acid, and the cabinet was opened without force. Someone possessed a key. Miles stiffened. I haven't set foot in the library since I was a boy. Uncle changed the locks, years ago. Said the house had ears. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Then how, Capitaine, did you know the raven was missing? For the first time, Miles faltered. Mrs. Danvers mentioned it when she woke me. Said the master's treasures were being stolen even in death. Jap stepped forward. We'll need the names of those at the inn, Captain, and a full account of your movements. Miles waved a hand, the gesture encompassing the room, the house, his life. Take what you need. I've nothing to hide, except a mountain of debt and a family that despises me. His eyes, bloodshot but defiant, met Poirot's. Find who did this, monsieur. Not for my sake, for Uncle's. He deserved better than to die like a stuck pig in his own study. Poirot bowed slightly. Justice, Capitaine, is blind to deserving. It seeks only truth. He moved to the window, parting the heavy velvet curtains. The fog pressed close, turning the glass into a mirror. In it he saw Miles' reflection, tense, watchful, and beyond, the faint outline of the moor, where something moved. A shape, black against gray. Wings. Tell me, Poirot said without turning, did your uncle keep sulfur in the house? For his experiments, perhaps? Miles frowned. In the old laboratory, West Wing. He mixed potions there, said the raven required offerings. Why? Poirot let the curtain fall. A hypothesis forms, but first... He broke off as a sudden crash shattered the quiet. Glass exploded inward from the French doors, shards scattering across the billiard table like diamonds on green felt. A brick thudded to the floor, wrapped in oilskin. Jap lunged for it, unwrapping the package with clumsy haste. Scrawled in charcoal on a scrap of parchment. The raven sees all. Miles stared at the words, color draining from his face. That's Uncle's hand, he whispered. I'd know it anywhere. Poirot retrieved the note with tweezers, examining the script. The strokes were bold, hurried, but the pressure of the charcoal varied as though the writer's hand had trembled. Forged, perhaps, he mused, or written under duress. Either way, someone wishes us to believe Sir Reginald yet speaks from beyond the grave. Jap was already at the doors, peering into the fog. No footprints, grounds too sodden. Whoever threw this vanished like a ghost. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ghosts, mon ami, leave no bricks, but they do leave messages. He tucked the note into his waistcoat. Come, we must speak with Dr. Hawthorne, and someone must search the laboratory before the raven returns to its perch. As they moved toward the corridor, the billiard room lamp flickered, casting the portrait of Sir Reginald into grotesque relief. For an instant, the painted eyes seemed to follow them, and in the empty cabinet a single black feather drifted down, settling where the stuffed bird had once kept vigil. The heir had returned, but the manor's true master was still the dead man in the library. And somewhere in the fog, the game of cat and raven had only just begun. Chapter 3. The doctor's secret rain lashed the tall windows of the west wing like the frantic claws of something trying to get in. The corridor smelled of damp stone and carbolic, the air sharp with the memory of ether and iodine. Hercule Poirot walked ahead of Inspector Japp, his patent leather shoes making no sound on the threadbare runner. At the far end, a door stood ajar, spilling a wedge of yellow light across the floorboards. From within came the measured clink of glass on glass, precise, methodical, the sound of a woman who trusted order more than people. Dr. Evelyn Hawthorne turned as they entered. She was tall, angular, the white coat over her charcoal dress giving her the severity of a hospital matron. Her hair, dark, streaked with premature silver, was pinned in a chignon so tight it seemed to pull the worry from her face. Only her hands betrayed her, long surgeon's fingers that trembled almost imperceptibly as she stoppered a brown bottle. Monsieur Poirot, Inspector. Her voice was low, educated, the faintest trace of Yorkshire beneath the polish. I expected you sooner. Death waits for no one, but detectives apparently keep continental hours. Poirot inclined his head. Forgive the delay, doctoress. The fog, it is democratic. It slows even the little gray cells. He surveyed the room. It had once been a conservatory. Now it served as laboratory and surgery combined. Shelves groaned under rows of bottles, laudanum digitalis chloroform, labeled in a neat, slanted hand. A microscope gleamed beneath a dust cover. Beside it, a Bunsen burner hissed gently, blue flame licking the base of a retort. On the bench lay a mortar streaked yellow with sulfur. Japp cleared his throat. Sir Reginald's body, doctor. You examined it at 6:30 this morning? I did. She removed her spectacles, polishing them on a linen cloth. Rigor beginning in the jaw and neck. Lividity fixed. Time of death between midnight and 2, though the cold room makes precision difficult. She replaced the spectacles, the gesture deliberate. The wound was the cause, single thrust, severing the left carotid, death within minutes, no defensive injuries. Poirot drifted to the bench, lifting the pestle. The sulfur clung to it in greasy crumbs. You keep brimstone for antiseptic purposes? Among other things. She did not elaborate. Instead, she opened a ledger, turning it toward them. Columns of dates, dosages, symptoms, somnambulism, night terrors, auditory hallucinations. The entries grew denser in the final month, the handwriting increasingly erratic, Sir Reginald's own scrawl beside her neat script. Sleepwalking, Poirot murmured. He wandered the moor? 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. Returned at dawn, barefoot, mud to the knees, no memory of his travels. Increased the laudanum. 20 minims, then 30. It only deepened the trances. Her mouth tightened. He spoke of ravens leading him. Said they carried messages from his dead wife. Japp snorted. More of this occult claptrap. Dr. Hawthorne's eyes flashed. Claptrap to you, Inspector. To him it was real. The mind, when diseased, manufactures its own reality. She closed the ledger with a soft thud. I warned him the house was poisoning him, literally and figuratively. The damp, the isolation, the endless talk of curses. Poirot's gaze fell upon a small enamel tray. In it lay a black feather identical to the one found beside the body. The tip was curled, discolored by a faint brownish stain. And this, doctoress? Another specimen for your studies? She hesitated. Only a fraction, but Poirot noted it. From the taxidermy raven in the library cabinet. I borrowed it last week to examine the mounting. The eyes are carnelian, not glass. Sir Reginald insisted I test them for occult properties. A faint, humorless smile. He believed they held a soul. Japp opened his mouth, but Poirot raised a gloved finger. "One moment." He lifted the feather with tweezers, holding it to the Bunsen flame. The tip blackened further, releasing a sharp, acrid whiff. Sulfur, unmistakable. Curious. The feather beside the body was singed identically. Yet the library fire was cold. Dr. Hawthorne's composure flickered. Coincidence. Sulfur is common in preservation. Or in staging a scene. Poirot's voice was silk over steel. He moved to a cabinet, opening it without asking. Inside, a row of hypodermic syringes, a bottle labeled morphine sulfate, and tucked behind, a small vial with the label half scratched away. He held it to the light. The contents were clear, viscous. "Laudanum is brown, non? This is odorless." She stepped forward swiftly. "A private preparation. For pain management." "Pain?" Poirot turned the vial, watching the liquid catch the light. "Sir Reginald suffered greatly in his final weeks." "Cancer," she said quietly. "Inoperable. Liver, pancreas, advanced. He refused hospital, refused even to acknowledge it. The sleepwalking was a symptom, metastases to the brain. I managed his pain as best I could." Japp's eyebrows rose. "You're saying he was dying anyway?" "I'm saying the manner of his death was merciful in comparison." Her voice cracked, the first real fracture in her armor. She turned away, busying herself with the burner. The flame guttered, then steadied. Poirot replaced the vial exactly as he found it. "You were here last evening?" "Dinner at 7. I examined him afterward, pulse racing, pupils dilated. He was agitated, claimed the ravens were at the window. I administered 30 minims of laudanum at 9:30, left at 10. Mrs. Danvers saw me out." "And your coat?" Poirot's eyes flicked to the hook by the door. A dark wool garment hung there, rain-spotted. He lifted it, examining the pocket. Something glinted. A brass key, small, ornate. The head was shaped like a raven's head, wings folded. "This opens—" Her hand went instinctively to her throat. "The laboratory, I lock it when I leave." Poirot tested the key in the door beside them. It turned smoothly. "Yet the library lock is different. Older, this key would not fit." "I have no key to the library." Her tone was flat, but her pulse beat visibly at her temple. Outside, thunder rolled across the moor, shaking the glass in its frames. The lights flickered once, twice, then died entirely, plunging the room into darkness broken only by the blue glow of the burner. In the sudden gloom, Dr. Hawthorne's silhouette seemed to shrink. Poirot's voice came soft, almost gentle. "Doctoress, a man dies in a locked room. A feather singed with your sulfur lies beside him. A key, perhaps not to the library but to another secret, rests in your pocket. You will forgive Poirot if he wonders." The darkness pressed close. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed the half-hour. Then from the corridor, a sound. Footsteps, deliberate, ascending the servant's stair. 1, 2, 3. The third step creaked, loud as a gunshot in the silence. The footsteps paused outside the laboratory door. Dr. Hawthorne's breath caught. "That stair is locked at night," she whispered. "Mrs. Danvers has the only key." Poirot moved to the door, hand on the knob. The footsteps resumed, slower now, descending. By the time he flung the door open, the corridor was empty, the runner undisturbed. But on the floor, just beyond the threshold, lay a single black feather, fresh, unsinged, its tip wet with rain. Japp swore under his breath. "Someone's playing games." "Games?" Poirot knelt, examining the feather. "No, mon ami, this is a message." The raven returns to its mistress. He rose, eyes glittering in the returning light as the lamps flickered back to life. Come. We must find Mrs. Danvers, and the key she guards so jealously. Behind them, Dr. Hawthorne stood motionless, the burner's flame reflected in her spectacles like twin blue fires. Her secret, whatever it was, had begun to burn. Chapter 4. The Housekeeper's Key. Mrs. Danvers waited in the servants' hall as though she had been poured there, upright, unblinking, the black bombazine of her dress absorbing the lamplight. 40 years of service had etched themselves into her face, the thin lips, the high cheekbones, the eyes the color of wet slate. A ring of keys hung from her waist on a steel chain, each one labeled in faded ink. She did not offer them. She simply let them speak for themselves. Poirot entered first, Jap a half-step behind. The hall smelled of tallow and boiled cabbage, of decades of deference. A single gas jet hissed above the deal table where Mrs. Danvers had laid out the household ledgers, open too. The page marked October 31st, the date of the murder, ink still wet. "You wish to see the keys," she said. It was not a question. "Oui, madame." Poirot's tone was courteous, almost deferential. The manor is a fortress, yet death walked its corridors. Keys are the arteries of such a place. She unhooked the ring with the reluctance of a priest surrendering relics. 12 keys, iron and brass, each tagged in Sir Reginald's crabbed hand. Library, cellar, attic, chapel, laboratory. And one, smaller than the rest, labeled simply portrait. Poirot lifted that one between thumb and forefinger. "The raven portrait in the attic?" Mrs. Danvers inclined her head a fraction. "The master's favorite, painted in 1897 by a Hungarian. He claimed the bird was alive when the canvas was stretched. He visited it nightly." Jap sniffed. "Another of his fancies." "Fancies do not bleed," Poirot murmured. He turned the key. It was warm, as though recently handled. "You accompanied him?" "Only to the foot of the stair. He forbade me to climb the final flight. Said the portrait spoke to him alone." Her voice dropped. "I heard it once, a whisper like wings in the rafters." Poirot's mustache twitched. "We will ascend. You will show us." Mrs. Danvers hesitated, then lit a candle in a tin holder. The flame guttered as they moved through the baize door and into the warren of back passages. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of dry rot and mouse droppings. Portraits of forgotten blackthorns glared down, admirals, dowagers, a child with eyes too old for its face. At the end of the upper corridor, a narrow staircase spiraled upward, its treads worn into scoops by generations of feet. The attic door was oak, iron-bound, the lock ancient. Mrs. Danvers inserted the portrait key. It turned with a groan as though the house itself protested. The door swung inward on hinges that had not been oiled in years. The attic was vast, a cathedral of shadows beneath the slate roof. Moonlight slanted through a single dormer, illuminating dust motes that drifted like ash. Crates, trunks, a child's rocking horse with one eye missing. And in the center, on an easel draped in black velvet, the portrait. It was larger than Poirot had expected. Life-sized, the raven depicted in mid-flight, wings spread to the edges of the frame. The feathers were rendered with obsessive detail, each barb catching the light. The eyes were carnelian, glowing as though lit from within. One of them, the left, was cracked, a hairline fracture running from pupil to rim. "Mon Dieu," Poirot breathed. "The bird it watches." Mrs. Danvers set the candle on a crate. The flame doubled the raven's shadow, making it seem to beat against the canvas. "He stood here for hours," she said, "talking to it. Said it knew his sins." Jap prowled the perimeter, kicking at trunks. "Nothing but junk. Where's the safe?" Poirot was already at the portrait. He ran his fingers along the gilt frame, pressing, testing. A soft click. The right side swung outward on concealed hinges, revealing a recess in the wall. Inside, a small iron safe, its dial combination lock gleaming. "The combination?" Poirot asked. Mrs. Danvers shook her head. "Only the master knew. He changed it weekly." Poirot knelt, ear to the dial. His fingers moved with the delicacy of a pianist. Click, click. The tumblers fell into place. The door opened. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked with age. Poirot lifted it carefully. The pages were filled with Sir Reginald's handwriting, dense, feverish. The final entry, dated the night of the murder: "They come at midnight, the feathers burn, I am the traitor, they know. The raven demands its due, if I do not pay, the house will fall." Beneath the journal, a single black feather, fresh, unsinged, and wrapped in oilskin, a photograph. A young woman, dark-haired, holding an infant. On the back, in faded ink, Evelyn, 1895. Jap whistled. "The doctor?" Mrs. Danvers' face was stone. "The master's ward, taken in after her parents died. Some said she was more than that." Poirot closed the safe, the journal tucked beneath his arm. "And the child?" "Sent away. A sanatorium in Switzerland, they said. Consumption." Her voice was flat, but her knuckles whitened on the keyring. They were turning to leave when the floorboard beneath Poirot's foot gave a hollow thud. He knelt, pried up the loose plank. Beneath, a bundle of letters tied with black ribbon. The top one was addressed to Captain M. Blackthorne, 14th Hussar, Cairo. The wax seal was broken. Poirot slit the ribbon. The letter was from Sir Reginald, dated 6 months earlier. "Your gambling has bankrupted us both. The raven has shown me the ledger of your soul. You are no longer my heir. Come not to Blackthorne again, or the bird will claim its tithe." Jap read over his shoulder. "Motive enough for murder?" "Or for despair," Poirot said quietly. He replaced the letters, the plank. "But the raven portrait. This is the heart of the mystery. Observe." He lifted the candle to the cracked carnelian eye. In its depths, something glinted, metal. Using his penknife, he pried the gem free. Behind it, a tiny keyhole. Mrs. Danvers gasped. "There was never—" Poirot inserted the smallest key from her ring, the one labeled portrait. It turned. A panel in the back of the frame slid aside, revealing a narrow cavity. Inside, a glass vial, half full of clear liquid, and a folded scrap of paper. The paper bore a single line in Sir Reginald's hand. "For when the pain becomes unbearable." E.H. Jap took the vial, sniffing. "Laudanum?" "Stronger," Poirot said. "Morphine, perhaps, enough to kill a horse." He turned to Mrs. Danvers. "You knew of this?" Her eyes were fixed on the vial. "He asked me to hide it. Said the doctor must never find it. That she would use it to control him." Poirot's mind raced, connecting threads. The singed feather, the sulfur, the locked room, the sleepwalking, the cancer, the mercy. A sudden groan echoed through the attic, the house settling or something else. The candle guttered violently. In the portrait, the raven's wings seemed to shift, the cracked eye weeping a single drop of wax-like blood. Mrs. Danvers crossed herself. "We should not be here." Poirot closed the panel, pocketed the vial and note. "On the contrary, madame, we are exactly where we must be." As they descended the spiral stair, the key ring jingled like a death knell. Behind them, the attic door swung shut of its own accord, the lock clicking with finality. On the landing below, a fresh black feather lay on the carpet, pointed toward the west wing, toward the laboratory, toward Dr. Hawthorne. Poirot picked it up, twirling it between his fingers. "The raven leads us still," he murmured. But now Poirot holds the key. Somewhere in the depths of the manor, a clock began to strike midnight, though it was only 7 in the evening. The house, it seemed, kept its own time. Chapter 5. The Midnight Reconstruction. The library clock had been stopped at 12:07 since dawn, yet at precisely 11:50 it gave a single rusty cough and began to chime. 12 strokes, each one slower than the last, as though the mechanism were bleeding out. Poirot stood beneath the stopped hands, pocket watch open in his palm, confirming the impossible. The house, he thought, is impatient for its drama. He had ordered every lamp lit. The room blazed like a stage. Sir Reginald's body had been removed to the ice house, but the desk remained, the blotter still bearing the faint outline of the corpse, the silver letter opener now wrapped in cotton wool on the mantel. The suspects stood in a loose semicircle, summoned by terse notes delivered by a trembling maid. Lady Arabella in dove-gray silk, eyes red-rimmed but steady. Captain Miles, uniform unbuttoned, brandy flask glinting at his hip. Dr. Hawthorne, coat discarded, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms corded with tension. Mrs. Danvers, black as a crow herself, keys clutched like rosary beads. Inspector Japp barred the door. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows, thick as wool. "Mesdames, Messieurs," Poirot began, voice crisp, "we reconstruct the crime. Not for theater, non, but for truth. Each of you will play your part exactly as the night demanded. Positions, s'il vous plaît." He directed them with small, precise gestures. Lady Arabella to the chaise by the fire, a book of Keats in her lap. Miles to the drinks table, decanter poised. Dr. Hawthorne beside the desk, medical bag open. Mrs. Danvers at the door, candle in hand. Poirot himself took Sir Reginald's chair, the high-backed monstrosity of carved mahogany. "Minuet," he announced. "The house sleeps. Sir Reginald works." He opened the journal found in the attic, turning to the final entry. He writes, "They come at midnight, the feathers burn. Observe, the ink is fresh, the nib still wet." He expected interruption. He rose, moving to the bookshelf behind the desk. His fingers found the hidden catch. A panel swung inward, revealing the narrow passage Mrs. Danvers had sworn was bricked up a decade ago. Dust motes danced in the lamplight. The air smelled of cold stone and secrets. "Locked room?" Poirot smiled. "Only to those who do not know the house's veins." Lady Arabella's hand flew to her throat. "There was never—" "Silence, madame." Poirot stepped into the passage, lantern raised. The others followed unwillingly, a grim procession. The corridor was barely shoulder-wide, the floorboards groaning. 10 paces in, a second panel, this one opening into the west wing, directly behind Dr. Hawthorne's laboratory. Japp whistled. "So the killer came from inside the house." "Or," Poirot corrected, "the doctor never left." Dr. Hawthorne's face was marble. "I was in my room by 10. "Prove it," Miles snapped. "You had motive, his money, his secrets. Enough." Poirot led them back to the library. He locked the main door, barred the windows, then, deliberately, unlocked the secret panel and left it ajar. "Now, the murder." He returned to the desk, picking up the letter opener. "The wound is precise. Carotid severed in one thrust, no hesitation, no struggle." He demonstrated the angle, the letter opener flashing. The killer stood here. He positioned Dr. Hawthorne behind the chair and struck thus. The doctor recoiled. "I did no such thing." Poirot ignored her. "But observe, the fingerprints on the handle are smudged, deliberately. With laudanum, perhaps, to suggest a drowsy struggle. Yet the wound is surgical. Only a doctor—" "I treated him for pain," Dr. Hawthorne's voice cracked. "He was dying, cancer eating him from within. He begged me." "Begged you for what?" Poirot's eyes were green ice. She sagged against the desk. "Release. The vial in the portrait, it was his. Morphine. Enough for a peaceful end. I refused. He said he'd do it himself, stage it as murder to punish us all." Miles laughed bitterly. So you helped him? No. Her whisper was raw. I came at midnight. Through the passage, he was already slumped, the letter opener in his throat, the feather beside him. I thought he'd done it. I panicked. I singed the feather with sulfur from my lab, scattered more to suggest the occult, to protect his legacy, to make it look like an intruder. Lady Arabella's voice cut like glass. You let us believe a madman stalked these halls. I believed it myself, Dr. Hawthorne said, until the bricks, the whispers, the raven outside the chapel. Poirot raised a hand. The raven. Always the raven. He crossed to the taxidermy specimen on its pedestal, now returned from the Yilubu laboratory. Observe. He lifted it. Beneath the base, a faint seam. He pressed. The plinth opened like a music box. Inside, a clockwork mechanism, gears tarnished but intact. A tiny bellows, a reservoir of sulfur powder. A trick, Jap breathed. The bird was rigged to puff brimstone? Oui. Sir Reginald's own device, perhaps to frighten intruders, perhaps to convince himself the curse was real. The killer used it. Poirot turned to Dr. Hawthorne. But you, Doctoress, you staged the supernatural to hide a mercy killing you did not commit. She nodded, tears cutting tracks through the powder on her cheeks. He must have taken the morphine after I left. Staged the wound himself, the letter opener, his own hand. Miles stepped forward, voice shaking. Then who locked the room? Who threw the brick? Poirot's gaze swept the room. Someone who knew the passages, who had access to the keys. He turned to Mrs. Danvers. Madame, you loved your master, perhaps too much. The housekeeper's face crumpled. He was my son, she whispered. Illegitimate, hidden. I kept his secrets 40 years. When I found him dead, I locked the door from the inside, climbed out through the passage. I wanted the doctor blamed, she who failed him. Silence, thick as the fog outside. Poirot sighed. The crime then is layered, suicide. Mercy attempted but not taken. Deception upon deception. But the true killer, he gestured to the desk, is despair. A sudden crash shattered the stillness. The French window exploded inward, glass cascading like ice. A groundskeeper burst through, face white, shotgun trembling in his hands. The raven, he gasped. It's real, flying over the moor. I saw it, wings like a man's span. Poirot strode to the window. In the fog, a shape wheeled, black, vast, impossibly graceful. It banked once, then vanished into the night. Jap swore. Another trick? Poirot's eyes narrowed. Or the final act? He turned to the others. The reconstruction is complete, but the play is not over. The raven flies, and it carries a message we have not yet read. Somewhere in the house, a clock began to chime again, though every timepiece in the manor had been stopped at Poirot's command. The sound was not mechanical. It was the slow, deliberate beat of wings against glass. The midnight reconstruction had solved the death, but the manor's darkest secret was only now taking flight. Chapter 6. The Raven's Flight. The fog had thickened into a living shroud, swallowing the manor whole. Lanterns guttered in the wind as Poirot led the ragged procession across the courtyard, coat collar turned up, eyes narrowed against the wet. Behind him came Jap, shotgun borrowed from the groundskeeper. Then Dr. Hawthorne, wrists bound with Jap's handkerchief, Miles, flask abandoned, face grim. Lady Arabella, shawl clutched like armor. Mrs. Danvers, keys still jangling, her confession, a weight heavier than iron. The groundskeeper, old Wilkes, brought up the rear, torch raised high, its flame hissing in the damp. They moved single file along the gravel path that led to the moor. The raven had been sighted circling the ruined chapel a half-mile west, its silhouette unmistakable against the low moon. Wilkes swore it carried something in its talons, Paper, perhaps, or cloth. Poirot had not waited for debate. "The bird is the courier," he declared. "We follow, or the message is lost." The moor was a treacherous sea of heather and peat, sucking at boots, exhaling cold breath. Every footfall released the scent of rot and iron. Somewhere a curlew cried, the sound thin and mournful. Poirot's lantern swung in rhythmic arcs, illuminating tufts of bog cotton that glowed like ghosts. No one spoke. The only sounds were breathing, the crunch of gravel giving way to squelch, and faint but persistent, the croak of a raven ahead. After 10 minutes, the ground rose. The chapel emerged from the mist like a broken tooth. 3 walls, a collapsed bell tower, ivy strangling the stones. The door, oak, iron-studded, hung ajar on one hinge. Wilkes' torch revealed fresh mud on the threshold, boot prints too large for any bird. "Inside," Poirot ordered. They filed in. The air was colder here, thick with the reek of damp stone and something sharper, sulfur again, but fresher, acrid. Moonlight slanted through the ruined roof, striping the flagstones. In the center, on a makeshift altar of packing crates, stood the taxidermy raven from the library cabinet. Its wings were spread, carnelian eyes catching the torchlight. Beneath it lay a single sheet of vellum, edges charred, weighted by a stone. Poirot lifted the paper with tweezers. The handwriting was Sir Reginald's, undeniable now, the same spidery scrawl from the journal. "To whoever finds this, I go willingly. The pain is a fire that consumes. Forgive the theater. It is the only legacy I can leave. The raven will guide you to the truth. Burn the rest." Japp read over his shoulder. "Suicide note, dated yesterday." "Yesterday," Poirot echoed. "Yet the body was found this morning. Someone delayed its discovery." Dr. Hawthorne's voice was hoarse. "He wrote it during my last visit. I thought it delirium." Miles kicked at the altar. "Then who moved the bird? Who locked us in the library with tricks and feathers?" Mrs. Danvers stepped forward, keys trembling. "I did. After I found him. I wanted the doctor punished. She who let him suffer." Poirot's gaze swept the chapel. The raven's plinth had been wiped clean, but faint scorch marks ringed the base. Sulfur burns. He knelt, brushing away dust. Beneath the altar, a tin box. Inside, a clockwork bellows, a vial of yellow powder, a length of fishing line, the same mechanism from the library bird repurposed. "A portable haunt," Poirot murmured. Sir Reginald's final illusion. He planned to stage his own disappearance, perhaps to vanish into the moor, spare the family scandal. But the cancer acted faster. Lady Arabella's laugh was brittle. He'd rather play ghost than die in bed. Wilkes shifted uneasily. "The bird I saw, it was alive, I swear, flew straight from here." Poirot stood. "Show me." They emerged into the night. The fog had lifted slightly, the moon hung low and bloated. Wilkes pointed northwest toward a stand of wind-stunted oaks. "There." Landed atop the old gibbet tree. The tree was a skeletal sentinel, its branches gnarled like arthritic fingers. Something glinted among the leaves. Poirot raised the lantern. A second raven, real this time, perched on a noose of frayed rope. In its beak, a scrap of oilskin. It regarded them with beady eyes, head cocked, then dropped the packet and launched into the air with a clatter of wings. Japp lunged, catching the oilskin before it hit the ground. Inside, a brass key, identical to the one from Dr. Hawthorne's pocket, and a folded note in Sir Reginald's hand. "The passage beneath the chapel leads to the ice house. There you will find what remains. Tell Evelyn I tried." Dr. Hawthorne made a sound, half sob, half scream. "He wanted me to find him, to finish it." Poirot took the key. "The ice house, where the body now lies. Come." They retraced their steps, the chapel door creaking shut behind them like a coffin lid. The path to the ice house was overgrown, brambles tearing at coats. The building was a low stone dome half sunk into the earth, its door secured by a padlock crusted with rust. The new key turned smoothly. Inside, the cold was a physical blow. Frost feathered the walls, their breath plumed white. Sir Reginald's body lay on a trestle table, shrouded in linen. Poirot drew back the cloth. The throat wound gaped, dark and precise. But something was wrong. The letter opener was missing. Japp swore. It was here an hour ago. Poirot's lantern swept the room. In the corner, a heap of straw. He kicked it aside. Beneath, a trap door, newly oiled hinges. He lifted it. Stone steps descended into darkness. "The passage," he said. "From chapel to ice house, Sir Reginald's escape route." They descended. The tunnel was narrow, shored with timber, the air thick with earth and decay. 20 yards in, a second chamber, smaller, drier, a camp bed, a lantern, a stack of journals, and on the bed the silver letter opener cleaned of blood beside a final note. "I cannot do it. The raven mocks me. Evelyn, forgive." Dr. Hawthorne sank to her knees. He tried to stage it all. The locked room, the sulfur, the bird. But in the end he couldn't take his own life. He came here to die alone. Miles' voice was rough. "Then who killed him?" Poirot picked up the letter opener. On the blade, faint traces of a sticky residue, laudanum but mixed with something else. He sniffed. Digitalis, from the doctor's bag. Enough to stop the heart. All eyes turned to Dr. Hawthorne. She was staring at the note, tears frozen on her cheeks. "I came through the passage," she whispered. "After midnight. He was alive, barely, begging. I gave him the digitalis in brandy, then the letter opener, to make it look like suicide gone wrong. I planted the feather, the sulfur. I thought if it seemed occult, no one would question mercy." Mrs. Danvers' keys clattered to the floor. "You murdered my son." "He was in agony," Dr. Hawthorne said. "I loved him. More than any of you." Poirot's voice cut through the chill. "Love, doctoress, is not absolution. You euthanized a man who had already chosen death, then staged a supernatural murder to hide it. The raven was your prop, Sir Reginald's own device, turned against him." Japp stepped forward, cuffs ready. "Evelyn Hawthorne, I'm arresting you." A sudden thud overhead. The trap door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed them. From above, the scrape of the bolt. Miles pounded on the wood. "Wilkes, open it!" No answer, only the slow, deliberate beat of wings against stone. Poirot's lantern flickered. In its dying light they saw the walls covered in charcoal sketches, ravens, hundreds of them. And in the center a single word scrawled in blood. "Confess." The tunnel had become a tomb. The raven had led them exactly where it wanted. Chapter 7, The Confession. Darkness pressed like a living weight, the air in the tunnel turning sour with panic and frost. Poirot's lantern gave one last sputter and died, leaving only the thin blade of moonlight that leaked through a crack in the trap door above. The sketches on the walls seemed to writhe, hundreds of ravens, wings overlapping, eyes scratched deep into the stone as though the birds had clawed their way out of the rock itself. The word confess glistened wetly, the letters still tacky. Japp hammered on the trap door with the butt of the shotgun. "Wilkes, open this bloody door!" His voice cracked on the second shout. No answer came but the slow scrape of boots retreating across the icehouse floor. Dr. Hawthorne's breathing was ragged. "He locked us in. Wilkes, he was Sir Reginald's man. He heard everything." Mrs. Danvers sank to her knees, keys clattering. My boy, my boy." The words dissolved into a low, animal keen. Poirot's voice cut through the gloom, calm as winter water. "Silence, mes amis. Panic is the raven's ally. Observe." He knelt, fingers tracing the floor. The dust was thick, but beneath the trap door a narrow groove ran the width of the stone, a hinge, concealed. "A second exit. Sir Reginald built his bolt holes well. Miles dropped beside him, digging with bare hands. Here, iron ring, help me. Together they heaved. A slab the size of a hearthstone lifted with a grinding protest, revealing a crawl space no wider than a coffin. Cold air rushed in, carrying the reek of peat and heather. The Moor, Poirot said. He planned to vanish entirely. Lady Arabella's voice floated from the darkness, thin and sharp. Then let us vanish before we freeze. They crawled single file, Poirot first, then Miles, Arabella, Jap, Dr. Hawthorne, Mrs. Danvers last. The passage slanted upward, roots snagging at hair and coats. After 20 yards, it spat them into a hollow beneath an ancient yew, its branches forming a cage against the sky. The fog had thinned. The moon hung low, turning the moor silver. Jap emerged, coughing. Wilkes will be halfway to the village by now. No, Poirot said. He returns to the chapel. The Raven's altar awaits its priest. They ran. The ground sucked at their boots, but adrenaline lent wings. The chapel loomed ahead, its broken tower a jagged finger against the stars. The door stood open. Candlelight flickered within. Wilkes knelt before the packing crate altar, the taxidermy raven cradled in his arms like a child. A shotgun lay across his knees. On the crates, the suicide note had been replaced by a single object. The silver letter opener cleaned and gleaming. Beside it, a photograph, the same one from the attic safe. Young Dr. Hawthorne holding an infant. Wilkes did not look up as they entered. He promised me, he said, voice cracked with age and grief. Said when the pain grew too great, I'd be the one to end it, clean, honorable, like putting down a loyal dog. His gnarled hands stroked the raven's glass eyes. But she took that from me, the doctor, poisoned him with her needles in her pity. Dr. Hawthorne stepped forward, wrists still bound. He was suffering, Wilkes. You saw it. The nights he screamed until his voice gave out. I saw him beg you to stop the laudanum, Wilkes snarled. Said it made the ravens louder. You wanted him weak, dependent, so you could play God. Poirot moved slowly, circling. You locked us below to force the truth, but you have known it all along. Wilkes nodded. Found him at 1 in the morning, already cold, the letter opener in his throat but the angle wrong for his own hand. I carried him to the ice house, staged the library, sulphur, feather, the clockwork bird. I wanted her to hang. He lifted the photograph. She was his bastard daughter, did you know? Born to a housemaid in '95, he sent the child away but kept her close enough to torment. Dr. Hawthorne's knees buckled. He told me the night he died, said the cancer was punishment, that I'd inherit everything if I kept his secrets. Mrs. Danvers rose, trembling. You knew he was my son and said nothing? I knew he was dying, the doctor whispered, and I loved him. Not as a daughter, as a woman who watched him waste away. When he begged for the digitalis, I gave it. Then the letter opener, to make it look like suicide. I thought if the world believed the curse took him, his name would stay clean. Wilkes laughed, a sound like breaking twigs. Clean. He was rotten with guilt. The ravens were his conscience. He lifted the shotgun. But I'll finish what he started. Jap raised his own weapon. Put it down, old man. Poirot stepped between them, unarmed, voice soft. Non, mon ami, the confession is complete. The raven has spoken. He turned to Dr. Hawthorne. You administered mercy, then murder. Wilkes staged the supernatural to frame you. Mrs. Danvers locked the library to protect her son's memory. Captain Miles forged the brick message to deflect suspicion. Lady Arabella burned the correspondence that proved the affair was real. Each of you a piece of the puzzle. Miles flushed. I threw the brick to make it look like an outsider. Silence, Poirot snapped. The truth is a mosaic. Sir Reginald planned his own death but lacked the courage. Dr. Hawthorne finished it. Wilkes orchestrated the haunting. The rest of you, accomplices after the fact. Wilkes's shoulders sagged. The shotgun clattered to the stones. He was my master. 40 years, I'd have followed him into the fire. Poirot knelt, picking up the letter opener. Then follow him into justice. He turned to Jap. Arrest them all. Euthanasia, accessory obstruction. The courts will sort the degrees. Dr. Hawthorne's voice was barely audible. Will they hang me? Poirot's eyes were pitiless. They will hang the lie. The truth merely imprisons. Outside, the first pale streak of dawn touched the moor. The taxidermy raven caught the light, its carnelian eyes suddenly dull. Somewhere in the distance, a real raven called once, then fell silent. Jap cuffed Wilkes, then the doctor. Mrs. Danvers stood motionless, keys dangling. Miles stared at the altar as though seeing it for the first time. Lady Arabella began to laugh, softly, hysterically, until Jap silenced her with a look. Poirot stepped into the doorway. The fog was lifting entirely now, revealing the manor in the distance, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. He tucked the letter opener into his pocket beside the cracked carnelian eye from the portrait. The case is closed, he said quietly, but the house will never sleep again. As they marched the prisoners back across the moor, the chapel door swung shut behind them. The candle within guttered and died. In the sudden dark, the raven on the altar seemed to spread its wings, one final illusion before the light claimed everything. Chapter 8. The Housekeeper's Revenge. The dawn that finally broke over Blackthorn Manor was the color of watered blood, thin and reluctant. The fog had peeled away in ragged strips, revealing the house in all its gaunt severity. Granite walls streaked with lichen, chimneys exhaling nothing. The gargoyles above the porte cochere leering as though they had witnessed everything and found it wanting. The prisoners walked in a silent line, Jap's shotgun herding them like geese. Dr. Hawthorne's wrists were raw from the cuffs. Wilkes shuffled, head bowed, the weight of 40 years of loyalty dragging at his boots. Mrs. Danvers brought up the rear, keys still at her waist, but the chain hung slack now. The fight gone out of her. Poirot walked apart, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the manor as though it might yet speak. The moor was quiet, no curlews, no wind, only the crunch of gravel underfoot and the distant rhythmic thud of the sea against the cliffs 3 miles west. He had not slept. The little gray cells required no rest when the pattern was complete. They reached the courtyard just as the first police van from the village nosed through the gates, its bell clanging like a funeral knell. Constable Hargreaves leapt out, helmet askew, face flushed with the importance of the moment. Inspector Jap, we came as soon as the telephone lines were restored. The storm... Later, Jap barked. Take these 2 into custody. He shoved Wilkes and Dr. Hawthorne forward. Murder, accessory, the lot. The rest'll need statements. Hargreaves hesitated, eyes darting to Mrs. Danvers. The housekeeper, too? Jap glanced at Poirot. The detective shook his head almost imperceptibly. Madame Danvers has confessed to obstruction. She locked the library, planted evidence. But the hand that killed was the doctor's. Mrs. Danvers stopped in the center of the courtyard, the keys suddenly heavy in her grip. Obstruction, she repeated, the word flat. 40 years I kept his secrets, scrubbed his floors, starched his shirts, buried his bastard child in a Swiss sanatorium so the world wouldn't know. And you call it obstruction. Lady Arabella, who had been silent since the chapel, laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. You buried more than a child, Danvers. You buried the truth about me. The letters you burned, the nights you listened at keyholes. Mrs. Danvers turned slowly. You were a whore in silk, madam. He despised you. The only reason he kept you was the title. Arabella's hand flashed, a slap that cracked across the housekeeper's cheek. Mrs. Danvers did not flinch. Blood welled at the corner of her mouth, bright against the gray. "Enough!" Jap roared. "Hargreaves, get them inside, separate rooms. Poirot, a word." The constable herded the women toward the servants' entrance. Miles lingered, watching the manor with the expression of a man who had lost a fortune and found it again in ashes. "The house goes to me now," he said quietly. "Debts and all. I'll sell it to the National Trust. Let the tourists gawk at the curse." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You will sell nothing, Capitaine. The will was altered 6 months ago. Sir Reginald left everything to Dr. Hawthorne, on condition she maintain the estate as a sanatorium for shell-shocked soldiers. A final act of contrition." Miles paled. "The bastard, even in death!" A sudden crack split the air. Not thunder, gunshot. Jap spun, shotgun raised. The sound had come from the east wing, the old nursery long shuttered. Poirot was already moving, coattails flying. "The passage! Wilkes spoke of a second tunnel!" They ran, the courtyard blurred. Through the scullery, up the back stairs, boots pounding on bare boards. The nursery door hung open, a sliver of gray light spilling out. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of gunpowder. Mrs. Danvers stood in the center of the room, a Webley revolver in her hand. Sir Reginald's service pistol, kept in a locked drawer since the Boer War. Smoke curled from the barrel. On the floor, Dr. Hawthorne lay on her back, a neat red hole in the center of her forehead, eyes wide and surprised. The cuffs lay beside her, snapped open, Wilkes doing perhaps in a final act of loyalty. Mrs. Danvers' voice was steady. "She killed my son. Mercy, she called it. I call it murder." Jap leveled the shotgun. "Drop it, woman, now!" She smiled, a small, terrible thing. 40 years I served. I know every beam, every joist. This house is mine." She raised the pistol to her own temple. Poirot stepped forward, hands open. "Madame, the raven has taken its due. Do not give it another soul." For a moment the room held its breath. Dust motes drifted in the shaft of light. Somewhere below, Hargreaves shouted up the stairs. Mrs. Danvers' finger tightened on the trigger. Then the keys slipped from her waist, clattering to the floor like bones. The pistol followed. She sank to her knees beside the doctor's body, cradling the dead woman's head as though it were a child's. "Evelyn," she whispered. "He loved you, in his way." Jap moved in, cuffs ready. Poirot knelt, closing Dr. Hawthorne's eyes with gentle fingers. "The cycle ends," he murmured. "Mother, daughter, son, all claimed by the same darkness." Miles appeared in the doorway, face ashen. "The will, does it still stand?" Poirot rose. "The sanatorium will be built, with or without heirs. The house demands its penance." They carried the bodies down together. Dr. Hawthorne wrapped in a dust sheet. Mrs. Danvers walking between constables, unresisting. Wilkes was found in the chapel, hanging from the bell rope, the taxidermy raven clutched to his chest. A note pinned to his coat. "The bird takes us all." By noon the manor was empty save for the police and the echo of wings. Poirot stood in the library one last time, the silver letter opener in his gloved hand. He placed it on the desk beside the cracked carnelian eye and the singed feather, a triangle of evidence complete. Jap joined him, helmet under arm. "The yard'll want a report, neat and tidy." Poirot's smile was wintry. "Tidy, mon ami." This was never tidy. A man planned his own death, a daughter granted it, a mother avenged it, a servant staged it. The raven was merely the chorus. He turned to leave. At the threshold, he paused. "One thing more. The portrait in the attic. Burn it, the eyes especially. Some illusions should not outlive their makers." As they walked down the drive, the manor seemed to watch them go. The gargoyles grinned. High above, in the clear, cold sky, a single raven circled once, then wheeled south toward the sea. Poirot did not look back. Chapter 9. The Little Gray Cells. The sun had climbed to its zenith by the time the last police van crunched away down the gravel, leaving Blackthorn Manor hollowed out and strangely diminished, as though the house itself had exhaled its final breath. The courtyard was littered with cigarette ends, boot prints, the faint metallic scent of blood carried on the wind. Poirot stood beneath the porte-cochere, overcoat buttoned to the throat despite the mildness of the day. His small feet planted precisely on the blackthorn crest worked into the flagstones. Inspector Japp approached, notebook closed, face etched with the weariness of a man who had seen too much in too short a time. "They've taken the bodies to the morgue," Japp said. "Danvers is sedated, kept raving about ravens pecking out her eyes. Wilkes cut down and bagged. The doctor, well, the bullet did the talking." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Press'll have a field day. Curse of the Raven Manor. Headline writes itself." Poirot's mustache twitched. "The press, mon ami, prefers sensation to sense. But we deal in sense." He gestured toward the library windows where the shutters still hung askew from the previous night's chaos. "Come, one final accounting before the little gray cells are dismissed." They entered the room together. The air was colder now, the fire long dead, yet the smell of brimstone lingered like a stubborn ghost. The desk had been cleared of evidence, feathers, vial, clockwork bellows, all tagged and sealed in boxes bound for Scotland Yard. Only the blotter remained, the faint outline of Sir Reginald's final slump still visible in the lamplight. Poirot moved to the center of the rug, turning slowly, taking in every detail as though seeing it for the first time. "Observe, Japp. A locked room, a wound precise, a feather singed by sulfur, a smell of hellfire, a portrait with a cracked eye, a tunnel beneath the icehouse, a shotgun in a nursery, all pieces of the same mosaic." Japp leaned against the mantel, arms folded. "You've said that before, but the courts'll want it simple. Who held the knife?" Poirot raised a finger. "The hand, yes, but the mind. That is where the true crime resides." He began to pace, small steps measured like a metronome. "Let us reconstruct, not theatrically but logically. Sir Reginald Blackthorn, tyrant, collector, hypocrite, was dying of cancer. He knew it. He planned his exit with the meticulousness of a military campaign, the will rewritten to spite his nephew, the sanatorium bequest to punish his wife, the morphine hidden in the portrait for the moment courage failed." He stopped before the secret, panel still ajar. But courage did fail. He summoned Dr. Hawthorne, his illegitimate daughter, though she believed herself merely ward and physician. He begged for digitalis to still the pain, then for the letter opener to make it swift. She refused the blade, gave the poison in brandy. When he yet breathed, she finished it with the silver opener. Merciful, she thought, but murder all the same. Japp nodded slowly. "And the occult nonsense?" "Staged by 3 hands. Dr. Hawthorne scattered sulfur and singed the feather to suggest supernatural agency, protecting the family name. Mrs. Danvers, discovering the body, locked the library from within and exited via the passage to cast blame on the doctor. She hated the woman who had replaced her in Sir Reginald's affections, who had failed to save her son. Wilkes, loyal to the end, moved the corpse to the icehouse, rigged the clockwork raven, threw the brick, whispered through keyholes. Each believed they acted alone. Each was wrong. Poirot opened his waistcoat, producing the cracked carnelian eye. He held it to the window. The light turned it to blood. The portrait was the key, literally. Behind the eye, the vial. In the safe, the journal. Beneath the floorboard, the letters proving Miles' disinheritance. The raven was never curse. It was conscience made manifest. Jap scratched his chin. And the real raven, the one Wilkes saw flying? A trained bird, perhaps, or simple coincidence. The moor is full of them. But coincidence is the detective's friend when logic has done its work. Poirot pocketed the eye. The final act, Mrs. Danvers' revenge, was inevitable. A mother's grief is a force more terrible than any ghost. He moved to the desk, running a gloved finger along the grain. The true crime was silence. Sir Reginald silenced his bastard daughter with money and distance. He silenced his wife with contempt. He silenced Miles with disinheritance. Dr. Hawthorne silenced his pain with poison. Mrs. Danvers silenced her grief with a bullet. Wilkes silenced his loyalty with a rope. The house itself, built on secrets, became the perfect amplifier. Jap closed his notebook with a snap. So no curse? Poirot's smile was wintry. Only the curse of being human. We manufacture devils when the mirror is too cruel. He turned toward the door. Come. The sanatorium will rise. Soldiers will walk these corridors and find no ravens, only daylight. They stepped into the entrance hall. Constable Hargreaves was supervising the removal of the portrait from the attic. The canvas was rolled tight, the cracked eye staring sightlessly from the bundle. Miles stood by the front door, a valise at his feet, face unreadable. The will stands, he said flatly. I'm out. Debt's unpaid. The army won't have me back. I'll take the train to London, see what's left. Poirot regarded him with something close to pity. You threw the brick, Capitaine. Forged the note. Obstruction. But the courts may be lenient. A soldier's desperation. Go. Begin again. The raven does not follow forever. Miles hesitated, then extended a hand. Poirot took it. The grip was brief, hard. Lady Arabella appeared on the staircase, dressed for travel, a single hatbox in hand. The house is yours now, Monsieur Poirot, in a manner of speaking. I wash my hands of it. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were red. Reginald's ghost can haunt the soldiers. I prefer the Riviera. Poirot bowed. Madame, some ghosts travel lighter than luggage. She descended the final steps, pausing beside him. Did he ever love anyone? Only the idea of himself, Poirot replied. And even that, not well. She left without another word. The door closed behind her with the finality of a judge's gavel. Jap cleared his throat. The yard's sending a car. You'll ride with me? Poirot shook his head. I walk to the village. The air clears the mind. He adjusted his hat, then produced a small tin from his pocket. Pastilles de menthe. He offered one to Jap, who declined. At the gate, Poirot paused. The moor stretched away, empty now, the chapel a broken silhouette against the sky. High above, a single raven wheeled once, then vanished into the sun. Jap watched it go. Think it'll come back? Poirot popped the pastille into his mouth, the mint sharp on his tongue. Birds return to familiar perches, mon ami. But this perch is burned. He started down the drive, footsteps crisp on the gravel. The little gray cells have spoken, the rest is silence. Behind him, Blackthorn Manor stood open to the wind, its windows blind. Its secrets finally bled out into the light. Chapter 10. The dark resolved the train south from Yorkshire was an elderly creature, wheezing and rattling as though it, too, carried the weight of Blackthorn Manor on its iron shoulders. Hercule Poirot sat alone in a first-class compartment, the door locked, the blind half drawn against the gray afternoon. Outside, the moors gave way to hedgerows, then to the orderly fields of the Midlands, but the landscape inside his mind remained fixed. The library blotter, the singed feather, the cracked carnelian eye that now rested in his waistcoat pocket like a small, cold heart. He had refused Jap's offer of company. The little gray cells, mon ami, require solitude to digest their feast. Jap had grunted, clapped him on the shoulder, and disappeared into the station buffet for a pork pie and a pint. Poirot preferred clarity to comfort. The compartment smelled faintly of coal smoke and polished leather. On the seat opposite lay his valise, neatly strapped, and beside it the dossier Jap had pressed upon him. Statements, photographs, the coroner's preliminary report. Poirot did not open it. He knew every word by heart. Instead, he withdrew the carnelian eye and held it to the window. The light turned it to fire, then to blood, then to nothing as the train plunged into a tunnel. In the sudden dark, he saw reflections. Sir Reginald's terror-frozen stare, Dr. Hawthorne's surprise at the moment the bullet took her, Mrs. Danvers cradling the dead woman's head, Wilkes swinging gently from the bell rope, the taxidermy raven clutched like a talisman. The train emerged into daylight. Poirot replaced the eye and took out his pocket watch. 3:15. In London, George would have the flat warmed, the fire laid, a light supper of sole and sautéed potatoes waiting. Routine was the balm of order after chaos, yet the chaos clung. He closed his eyes and let the little gray cells speak one final time. Conclusion. No single killer, but a conspiracy of grief, guilt, and love distorted into vengeance. The train lurched. Poirot opened his eyes. A boy in a porter's cap slid the compartment door open. "Telegram for Monsieur Poirot, sir. Marked urgent." Poirot took the envelope, tipped the boy sixpence. The message was brief in Jap's blunt hand. Danvers died in cell. Heart, no note. Wilkes' inquest tomorrow. Press calling it curse. Thought you'd want to know. Poirot folded the paper, placed it in his waistcoat beside the carnelian eye. Mrs. Danvers, 40 years of service, 1 bullet, 1 broken heart. The raven had claimed its final tithe after all. He looked out the window. The countryside had softened into the home counties. Church spires pricked the horizon, smoke curled from cottage chimneys. Ordinary life, resuming its quiet rhythm. Blackthorn Manor would become a sanatorium, its corridors filled with young men who had seen real horrors in Flanders and Gallipoli. The raven portraits would be painted over, the secret passages bricked up, the clockwork bird melted down for scrap. The house would heal, or try to. The train slowed for a station. Poirot gathered his valise. On the platform, a news vendor shouted headlines. Raven curse claims 3rd victim. Housekeeper dead in cell. Poirot bought a paper, folded it unread, and tucked it beneath his arm. Sensationalism was the opium of the masses. He preferred truth, however bitter. A taxicab waited beyond the barrier. The driver touched his cap. "Where to, sir?" "Number 14, Whitehaven Mansions, please." The cab pulled away. London swallowed them, brick and soot and the comforting roar of omnibuses. Poirot leaned back, eyes half closed. In his pocket, the carnelian eye seemed to warm against his chest, as though remembering the portrait's gaze. George opened the door with the precision of a Swiss watch. "Welcome home, sir. Dinner in 20 minutes. The fire is lit and I have taken the liberty of decanting the 21 Margot." "Excellent, George." Poirot surrendered hat and coat. "And the post?" "Only 1 letter, sir. Hand-delivered. No stamp." The envelope was heavy creamstock, sealed with black wax impressed by a raven in flight. Poirot's name was written in a spidery hand. He knew too well. He carried it to the sitting room, slit the seal with his penknife. Inside, a single sheet of vellum, edges faintly charred. The message was short. "You solved the manner, monsieur, but not the why." The raven was never curse, it was warning. "Burn this. Burn the eye. Some truths are doors best left closed." R.B. Poirot stood very still. The handwriting was identical to the journal, the suicide notes, the forged messages. Impossible. Sir Reginald had been dead 3 days. He crossed to the fire. The flames danced, hungry. For a long moment he held the letter above the grate, the heat licking at the paper's edge. Then deliberately he fed it to the fire. The vellum curled, blackened, became ash. The carnelian eye followed. It landed among the coals with a soft clink, glowed briefly like a coal itself, then cracked with a sound like a pistol shot. Poirot watched until nothing remained but dull red fragments. George entered with the decanter. "Dinner is served, sir." Poirot turned from the hearth, smoothing his mustache. "Thank you, George. I find I am unusually hungry." They dined in companionable silence, sole perfectly cooked, potatoes crisp, the Margot singing on the tongue. Outside, London settled into evening. A hansom cab clopped past, a woman laughed somewhere below. Normalcy restored. Later in his bedroom, Poirot prepared for bed with ritual care. He placed his watch on the nightstand, his clothes folded with military precision. Before drawing the curtains, he glanced out the window. Across the street, on the roof of the opposite building, a black shape perched. A raven, wings folded, head cocked as though listening. Poirot drew the curtain firmly. "Bonsoir, mon vieux," he murmured. "You have delivered your message, now depart." He slept without dreams. In the morning, the raven was gone. The sanatorium at Blackthorn Manor opened 6 months later, its first patients arriving by ambulance to find the corridors bright with fresh paint, the windows thrown wide to the moorland air. No feathers were ever found again. The portrait had been burned, the tunnels sealed, the clockwork bird destroyed. Yet sometimes on nights when the wind howled down from the north, the nurses claimed to hear wings against the glass. They laughed it off. Shell shock, imagination, the creak of old beams. But they kept the windows latched all the same. And in London, Hercule Poirot took on new cases, each more intricate than the last. He never spoke of Blackthorn Manor again. But in his waistcoat drawer, wrapped in silk, lay a single black feather, unsinged, perfect, a souvenir he could not bring himself to destroy. The dark, he knew, was never fully resolved. It merely waited, patient as a raven on a winter branch, for the next door to open.